Now we are recording. So all the practitioners would use the same book. And then at the end of the session, when we sit together to have our briefing and to kind of talk about how the day went, that's actually when we would fill in the right side. So we'd look at what we've observed, and then we'd write down what we think is happening now, what our thoughts are, what we think is happening, what we think needs to be done next. And I mean, sometimes when you are observing, things will pop up and you think, oh, you'll see something, you think, oh yeah, this child's really interested in frogs. Let me get that frog puzzle that we have somewhere. And you could write that as well on the right side. But the important thing is that the left side is very factual about what the child is actually doing. So we have this as an ongoing record. So we're constantly adding to it. You don't need any fancy forms. You don't need any fancy books. You can have them if you've got them. The form that I've shared with you guys on the platform is a really, really helpful form, but you don't have to have that. If it's easier to just have a spiral notebook, you can do that. And what we try to do is we try to have a cycle where after every presentation or after every thing that you're introducing to the children, you step back and take at least 10 minutes to observe. So if you're presenting 4 or 5 things, you'll be observing 4 or 5 times in one session. Observation is really so essential because it helps these young children who might not necessarily tell us what they know and don't know. And we can't gauge what they do and don't know through an exam or through a homework, because those don't really measure the child's actual ability. So when you observe, that's when you actually get to see what children are capable of. And what I've seen over my years of teaching is that there's many things that we miss about what children are capable of doing or what they're interested in. And we miss them because we're not observing. So observation is really an important key. And what I might do is set up maybe one of our other lives after the Eid, and we can do some observation activities together on Zoom to help you get started. Yeah, but it'd be really good if as a team you kind of decide how you're going to actually get together to do the observations, and then how you're going to let those observations feed into the practice that you're doing with the children. On the course, there are activities that you will have to do observations. So one of them was this week where you have to observe a child in the first plane of development. So there are activities. So those are really good opportunities for you to start, practicing those observation skills. Okay. I feel like everybody's really quiet today. So is it because it's Sunday or
I'm listening, but I'm just laying next to my daughter who is going to bed.
Okay.
So yeah, but I'm listening.
Okay, sure. Okay, so if there's no questions about last week's content, shall we continue with our Zoom, the slides that we were going through last week? We'll do that for a little while, and then we can look at week 3. So, okay, so you can see this, right? So the last thing we did together is we're defining Islamic Montessori education. So we have a clear idea of what Islamic education is, and then how does Montessori fit into all of it. And the emphasis here really is about supporting. I'm so sorry about Rosie. She just doesn't want to get away from me. I don't know what she wants. She was fine a little minute ago, but she might be putting her tail in there. Yeah. So the emphasis here is we want to develop this fully functioning human being who can reach their full potential. Okay, and that's quite a big statement, right? We know what the purpose of mankind is because we spoke about that already. But now we're talking about this idea of a fully functioning human being. And this has been something that at one point in about 2020, I actually found this really interesting, to actually go through the hadith, go through the Quran, go through the work of different scholars, to actually like what is the ideal character of a human being. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran that he created humans in the best of form. And part of that meaning is that we all have this capability to develop into the best potential that we can be. Okay. And human beings, like we said earlier, they're different from mankind. They're different from plants, and they're different from the animal kingdom, and they're different from the inanimate world. That we have been built with a specific purpose, and we've been given this ability to adapt and to make choices and to love and all of these things. So part of that is that we have this potential to become the greatest of creation, right? The greatest, to reach a higher level of creation. Okay. So one of the things that I was always interested in was about angels. We know angels they fully worship Allah. They do not sin. They're never disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they're fully always worshiping Allah. And I remember thinking in my days, before I was really researching into this, is that how come humans then are the best forms or the best of creation, right? And you know, I did a lot of research into that, and one of the things that came up is the fact that we as humans, we can, if we want to, become as good as the angels. We can dedicate our life to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we can worship him, and we can praise him, and we can remember him. But when we do it from choice. Whereas angels don't have a choice. The angels can only be one thing, but human beings have this choice to do it. And when you do something out of choice, then that thing that you do is so, it's what you're choosing. You don't have to do that. So it's really valuable, to see what I mean. So the human being, when they become a fully functioning human being, when they choose to do the right thing, when they choose to be on the right journey, and they choose to spend their life in service to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they choose to worship Allah, and they choose to remember him, and so on, then we become better than the angels. So there is that potential that the human beings have to become the best of creation. But just like we can be the best of creation, we can also be the worst of creation as well. Because if we don't use our potential in the right direction, and we don't fulfill the purpose of our life, then we drop lower than animals and plants, because we do not recognize our creator. So there's that potential within the human being to reach this highest level. And that highest level is when we perfect the human character. So I do this activity with a lot of groups, and sometimes it's with non-Muslim groups. And we talk about what are the characteristics of the perfect human being. Okay. Alhamdulillah, we're very lucky because we have the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ to be our example. And you could just read the hadith and read the seerah, and you could have all these examples of perfect character. But when I do this group with people who are not Muslim, it's quite sad, actually, because they're guessing. You know, you have a fitra that guides you, that tells you, maybe this is good, or maybe that's not good. You know, maybe, you know, things, for example, like tolerance of all these things that are going on in the Western world right now that you know, don't really fit with us Muslims. You know, tolerance to that and acceptance of that, and, you know, all these things. But they don't have those parameters that we have, and they don't have that guide that we have of the best of creation. And we know that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was sent as a mercy, and we know that he was the best of creation. So he's our example. But let's actually talk about this. What are his characters? What are those characters that are part of this perfect human being that we want our children to be developing, and we want our children to acquire as they go through their experiences of education with us? Okay, so that's why we have an activity. And I think that maybe we can just unmute yourself and just share any character. And if someone can just type it in or should we put a whiteboard? Let me put a whiteboard. and then we could actually just share on the whiteboard characteristics that you believe. Sorry, I'm going to open a Word document so it's easier to type for me. Characteristics that you believe are part of a fully functioning, perfect human being. You can unmute yourself and just share what you think would be characteristics. And these are the kind of characteristics that we're hoping, inshallah, the children who are under our care can develop. Okay, can you see the blank? Can you see the blank one? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Who would like to start?
Don't mind.
Assalamu alaikum. So I saw she wrote in the chat, she wrote trustworthy, and it reminded me of the story of Musa alayhi salam, when he was helping the women with the water, and one of the women told her father to hire Musa alayhi salam because he was strong and he was trustworthy. So possibly strong as well.
Okay.
So I would add any characteristic of the Prophet ﷺ, where he was like anything that he was, basically. So faithful, honest. He was forgiving. He was
kind.
Yeah.
Okay. Faithful, honest, forgiving, kind. What else do you think is the characteristic of a perfect human being?
Patient, sabr.
Let's see how long we can make this list. Usually it's around 30 to 40 things.
Humble.
I think being curious as well.
Sorry? Curious.
To be curious.
Uh-huh.
Loving,
Generosity.
caring,
Caring.
obedient, honest.
We have honest already.
Oh, we did, okay.
A good teacher.
So what if you along the good teacher, what could that also be? A role model as well, right?
Role model, yeah.
What else do you think?
Compassionate.
When you think about the example when he was respecting the child and asking permission of the child, I remember you saying in that workshop that we did, it makes me think of empathy as well. So how we can
Empathize.
empathize with children as well. So
Yeah.
he had that quality, and like an empath, he could feel child.
Respect, well, also respectful.
That
Respect.
goes with respect.
Yeah.
He was wise.
Wise, yes, that's a really good one.
Someone wise.
Not knowledgeable is right there.
I was going to say useful.
Yeah, that's a really good one. Useful, or should we say productive next to it as well?
Yeah, I think I'm thinking about, the hadith was that's, about how Allah loves the one that, is of service to the people.
Okay. Useful of service to people.
Or kind of the opposite of being selfish,
Selfless.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Humble.
Humble. Do we have humble already? We have humble already.
Oh, do we?
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Number 9.
Grateful.
Yes, that's a very important one.
That
Great.
is.
A good list.
Good listener. How about like when you think of modern life? Because sometimes there are characteristics of the prophet that we haven't really attached to modern life, but they are there in him. So how about in the modern life that we have now? What kind of characteristics do you think are so essential for a human being to have in order to really fulfill their potential as an adult in this modern time?
Education.
What do you mean by education?
Gaining knowledge, like as a prophet said, to gain knowledge from, I think, there's one saying I always remember, acquire knowledge from cradle to grave, always learn.
A lifelong learner, should we say?
Yeah.
How about things like
I'd say that he was considerate.
considerate is really good. Considerate. How about self-discipline?
So I was going to say
Fearful.
steadfastness.
Yeah, steadfastness.
Self-discipline is such a good one.
Does that go with organized? Oh no.
Well, I think organized is a good one to add here.
Mm. Did we have, yeah, reliable we did have. The reliable is more like trustworthy as well, saying.
What's
Did we
the
have
word
God
for
conscious?
somebody who is
Reliable.
Hard work.
not jealous?
Sorry, I can't hear that.
Content. Someone who's just
Content.
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 Yes.
Okay, that
Did
sounds.
we have God conscious?
That's really important.
Yeah. Like dependent on Allah, so that he always feels dependent on Allah. That's a good one, Kenny.
How about
Just.
just is really good. That's essential, isn't it?
So when you said in the modern time, how do we put a word for example, when someone's taking accountability, like for their actions?
Fairness.
I
That'd
think
be-
we have, what do we have? We have fair. We can write fair.
Optimistic.
Optimistic is a good one.
Hardworking.
Hardworking. Hannah, I think like the word that I know the word in Arabic that's kind of suits that really well, which is like muraqabah, like self-accountability or something like that. Is that what you mean?
I don't know Arabic.
Yeah, it's like something like self-accountability. Is that what you mean?
Yes, that's great. I think that's one of the characteristics of the Prophet ﷺ.
Do we have giving on here?
We had generous, so that's
Okay.
similar.
That's fine. What else? What else do you think? How about things like being firm?
Do we have truthful?
Good
there?
manners.
Sorry?
Truthful?
Truthful, we have truthful.
Or do we have no?
Manners. Good manners.
Manners, good manners.
When you say firm, I always think about the term that I love, that I discovered the term firm but kind.
Yeah.
Whatever it is that I'm doing with my children. So when you said firm, I thought of that. How would I approach a child when I want to set boundaries? So I like that, firm.
And I mean, even if you think of that, because remember that the child is developing into this fully functioning adult. So they have to have a firmness about what they believe in and who they are and what they stand for and what they will do, and a firmness to hold steadfast to the truth, right? So that's definitely a character that we need them to have. And of course, we start off by modeling it ourselves, like
Yes.
firm but kind.
How about good leadership skills?
Good listening, we have that, right? Is it? Yeah.
No, good leadership.
Leadership.
Sure.
Any more that you want to add on to this?
What about independence?
Yeah, definitely independent. How about creative? Do you think a human being needs to be creative?
Of course.
Definitely.
Courageous.
Courageous.
Courageous we didn't have. That's a good one.
Taking advice.
Taking advice. How should we write that one?
Taking and giving, yeah? Giving advice and taking on.
What would you put as something like not praise, but like, I don't know, self-worth? I don't know.
Probably.
Acceptance of
Others. Like there was no he wasn't arrogant, so like I don't know how to word it.
Modest.
Yeah, so
Modest.
seeing people for who they are, is that what you meant?
Humble, modest, yeah, not judging a person and
Accepting them fully for who they are, whatever.
and not being harsh with them. He was gentle.
gentle.
What about modest?
Modest is a good one. How about, because you know, one of the characteristics of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu is that he was highly intelligent and clever, right? That's one of the characteristics. It's Fatanatun. It's one of the unique characters of the Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu, that he was highly intelligent. And so how wouldn't that be something that we would think for a fully human being?
Would
Yes.
that count as knowledge? Like good knowledge?
That's
Knowledgeable?
what Amreen said. That's what Amreen said, yeah.
Well, he was a genius.
Maybe perfection. If you do something, you do it as
Perfection?
yeah, perfection.
I'm just thinking it takes a lot to be a perfect human being.
Well, this is the
We
thing.
have 50. We have just 50.
The next thing that comes up is you know, look at this list. We've put together what, 51, and I'm sure that this can probably go on a lot longer. But how many of these have we become? And you don't need to answer. This is just for between us and ourselves. But we can look at this list and we can just think, how many of these characters of the perfect human being have we acquired? You know, and then how many of these are we still working so hard to be? You know, because part of being an adult is this constant struggle of improving yourself to become the best human being that you possibly can become. And we're so lucky because the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is there as our guide, as our example, an example of a complete, perfect human being, right? And this list can go on and on because there's so much more that was in the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ. So this list can go on and on. Maybe what I'll do is I'll paste this in the forum as well, and then maybe you can just add to it, so that as a group you have your list that you're looking at. So if that's the case, and there's all of these characteristics, and we have a long way to go there, then are we the perfect example for the children? Are we trying to support the child to develop into another version of us? And if we're doing that, then what shortfall are we giving them? And this is where I really believe that as a Muslim practitioner who's on a journey, because Islam is a religion where you are always going to be on this spiritual journey of improving yourself to become the best version of yourself for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So as human beings who are on that journey, we then become humble because we know that we are not this perfect human being. We are not leading the child to acquire from us what we have, but rather we are facilitating and working together with them so that their potential can come out, so that they can develop all of these qualities, even if we have yet to have developed them. Right? So when you're an educator or when you're a parent, we have to step out the way, because we haven't reached that level of a perfect human being. Granted, there will be some characteristics in us that are brilliant, and each one of us will have characteristics that are great, and that's amazing for the children to have that experience with you and see those characteristics living and absorb them from you. But at the same time, we don't want to limit them to us. Since the child has this huge potential to become a perfect human being, then we want them to go beyond us. So then we really need to have this awareness of what are those characters beyond us? What are those characters that we are working towards as adults? And then what are those characters that we want our children to be building? And really, when you look at education or you look at tarbiyah, this aspect of all of these characters, those are actually the main part of what we want our children to get, because the academics will tag along with it. The academics will tag along, the maths will tag along, the reading will tag along. But if you have a human being who can read well, can do all this mathematics, but they're not trustworthy, or they're not respectful, or they're not humble, or they're not caring, then is that what we want for our children? What use is it to have somebody who's so academically developed, but then the actual characters of a perfect human being are not there? So it's kind of like, if you look at modern education, it focuses so much on the academics and it completely leaves this human side of development. But actually, the human side of development comes first. The human side of development should be what we are thinking about and working towards ourselves, and then also with the children that we're working on. And we as adults, when you look at that list, we as adults, we've already gone through our life journey and our stories and our incidents and our dramas or whatever it is that we've had in our life. And we've acquired baggage, or we've developed characteristics that maybe some are not so great, that we have to undo. For us, it's a lot of hard work to begin to change ourselves as adults to become a better version of ourselves. So if somebody has a temper and they're not patient and they're an adult, they have to put a lot more effort into being patient than a 3-year-old child does, or a 7-year-old child does, right? If somebody as an adult is not considerate or compassionate and caring for others, they have to put this very conscious effort into developing these skills of becoming a compassionate and caring human being. But the child, by nature, by fitra, they are already a caring and considerate human being. They just have to perfect that character in them. So then we are not the teacher as the model that we want the child to follow, but instead we are facilitators on a journey together with the child, to guiding them and directing them to the perfect example. And that, for example, is the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ for us, to the perfect example. And even if within ourselves we are still working on one of these characteristics, we can be a facilitator to support the child, who will probably do it much quicker than us to develop that characteristic. Okay, so it's really important that we have this understanding of what a fully functioning human being is. And we have to remember that the potential of the child is that they're going to develop their characters anyway. They're going to develop a personality. They're going to develop a character. But depending on the environment the child is in and depending on the experiences that they have, either they'll develop characters that are praiseworthy, all these wonderful characters that we mentioned, such as gratitude, ihsan, humility, all of those things. Or they can very easily develop what we can call blameworthy qualities, such as ingratitude or envy or anger or hatred or so on. So the child is they're gonna develop one of these anyway. Okay. This is why education is so important, especially education of the little ones, because they're going to develop a character. What we really need is that they develop the character that's in line with the praiseworthy. And honestly, when I do this kind of training with teachers who are not Muslim, I really pity them, because it's very much to do with the modern times, to do with the recent trends, to do with the recent whatever's going on social media or whatever it is, that they take those as that's a good quality. But then you're like, well, actually, is it a good quality? But we're so lucky because we don't have to be experimenting. We know clearly the praiseworthy qualities are those qualities that we'll see in our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Amreen, you have your hand up. Do you want to ask a question?
I just want to ask you, when we're talking about the characteristic, like you mentioned, praiseworthy, blameworthy, around what age are you looking at when you say, with whatever the way you've explained is, by the way, beautiful. But I wanted to know, at what age are we looking at? Like, what if I don't know if my question makes sense, but I'm wanting to find out at what age are we looking at these qualities? And for example, my question is more that, for example, if a 5-year-old or that 7-year-old, 8-year-old is showing the blameworthy qualities, I'm sure we are able to. It's never too late. Like, hence why I want to know. I'm sure we are able to change it, back to the praiseworthy. But what age group are we looking at when we're mentioning these qualities?
Okay. So for me, the way that we see it, like, we're going to go through the planes of development
Okay.
in one of the lectures, and I think it's actually coming up in this week it's actually the week that you watch. So the planes of development. So one of the things that you see in those lectures of the planes of development, that 6 to 12 is an age of where the child is developing their human character very strongly. They're really actively working on developing their human character between 6 to 12 years. But from 0 to 6, the child is absorbing everything. And so they are absorbing the characters and, the examples and the models that they see of the human beings around them. So even if the child is not displaying all the characters, or they're not showing it, a child between 0 to 3 is literally is like a tape recorder, storing all of these in any interaction that they see human beings have with each other. They're storing it. They're storing how you approach life, how you talk to each other, how you interact with people who are well off, or people who are people you don't like, or whatever it may be. So actually, this comes from birth. This starts at birth. Having a clear idea of what the praiseworthy qualities are is essential for everybody. I really believe all mothers should know. You just need to be aware of it, because everybody knows this, but we just need to be aware of it and really look at it in a more structured way, so that we have that there in our mind. So I really believe all mothers should be aware of this, because the newborn baby is absorbing it from you. And we know through neuroscience that most of the time as adults, our system that runs us is our subconscious mind. And that subconscious mind is what was absorbed and installed within us from 0 to 3 and the 0 to 3 period. Because Montessori tells us that what the child is absorbing from 0 to 6, it forms the basis of their character and the basis of the human being that they're going to be. So where you work with younger children, you have to be aware of these, because it's not that you're going to teach them about anger and how not to be angry. You know, we would teach an elementary child about how not to be angry, but it's about modeling. It's about creating an environment where all of these praiseworthy qualities are present for them to absorb. So when we're talking about things like firm but kind, they need to see models of adults in their classroom, in their home environment, being firm but kind, so that the child will absorb that and it becomes part of their personality. And of course, if a child has acquired characteristics that are, they have somehow gone off track and acquired characteristics that, let's say, are blameworthy or the opposite of what we want them to have, of course, it's completely changeable. It's not fixed. I mean, I you know, worked with children who have a problem with lying, children who have a problem with stealing. You know, I've worked with things like that, and a lot of people think, oh, you know, that it's very hard for the child to stop, but actually it's so much harder for an adult who steals to stop stealing. It's so much harder for an adult who lies to stop lying. Children are so ready to embrace the truth and embrace the good. So if you see these in children that you're with, it's you just direct them to the right. You just direct them to the truth, but you have to be aware of what these qualities are. Because part of this developing a fully functioning human being is to actually embrace all of these praiseworthy qualities and live by them. And I think that it's quite challenging in this day and age, because there's so many examples around our children and models that are not praiseworthy. So it's really easy for them to pick up things. But if we are firm as parents and firm as a school or firm as practitioners, then, you know, the influence that we have will be long lasting, and it can help the children to come away from those characters. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it did. Because I have definitely worked with a lot of children, or came across a lot of children who have the blameworthy qualities, and like you mentioned, the lying, the stealing, and you just feel you just feel like you don't know how to deal with it, and how to make it better. And sometimes you feel like you almost hit like a dead end, you know. But I want to know, but I keep telling myself it's never too late. You know, you can always you know, like you say, children are all about embracing the good, and learning, you know, the good things more than anything. So, and when you said like Capricorn, I always think about it as sponge. I always say 0 to 6 children are sponges. They will absorb every drop of water that they, you know, that they get.
Yeah.
And they see everything, they listen to everything, they watch, and the way you've explained beautifully, that they see how you interact when you are with the good people and the bad people as well. That was a big one, definitely.
Yes. And I think, like, if you're in a country, let's say, for example, where there's maids and there's beggars and there's things like that,
Yeah.
you know, people don't realize that your child is gonna, they're going to absorb that interaction that you have with another human being, because for the child, they don't see the difference between a maid and their uncle or their aunt or whatever. They just see everybody as a human being. They're going to absorb that. And then
I've seen more of children who have very old elderly grandparents, and I've seen when, you know, when the parents are getting really frustrated and, you know, agitated, and be like, I can't deal with this, or shit, you know, this so and so grandparent's really troubling, you know, and the child absorbs that. And then you see these little children after a few weeks or so, and you're like, they start acting the same way to their very elderly grandparent as the parents are acting. And you're like, oh my, like they're literally mirroring.
Yeah.
You know, they don't realize what they're doing. They've just seen the parents do that, and, you know, yeah.
That's very sad. And that's why we have to be aware of this. And as educators, we need to really have this at the forefront of what we're doing, is you know, yes, there's the academics, and yes, there's teaching children about Hajj and teaching them how to pray and teaching Quran and teaching this and teaching that. But it really doesn't matter if somebody's memorized the whole Quran, but they have all this ugly, horrible, blameworthy qualities. Okay. It's actually about becoming the praiseworthy qualities, and memorizing the Quran strengthens you, and learning to pray strengthens you, and doing all of this, and it then you become this beautiful human being. And that's what education is. It's about helping the child to reach their full potential and to become this beautiful human being who is embodying as much as possible the characteristics of the Prophet Muhammad SAW. Then it's truly Islam. It's truly Islam, surrendering. It's truly that, right? So think about that. This is part of education. It's what we should be considering this. And we're so lucky. Again, I'm going to keep saying this because I think we don't appreciate it enough as Muslim educators. We're so lucky because we don't need to think about whose example should we follow. We just have the perfect creation as our example. So you don't even need to wonder, is this a good character? Is this a bad character? You know, how do we balance firm but kind? How do we be patient, and when do we be steadfast? And how do we, you know, we don't even have to work that one out. It's there for us because we are born into Ummah Muhammad, the Ummah of Prophet Muhammad, and he was sent as a mercy to the whole of mankind, and he's the seal of the Prophet, meaning that every single thing that's needed for the human being is sealed within him as the example. So we're so lucky, and I really believe that just knowing that should make you have shukr. Just knowing that should make you have shukr, because if you have shukr by hearing that, then when you interact with your children, they will absorb that feeling and shukr that you have. And as you guide and support the children to perfect their character, to be like the Prophet Muhammad SAW, we are helping them to also fall in love with him and know him and connect to him. And that's part of our purpose of life, right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, indeed the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is it Quran or Hadith? Is the most righteous of you. Sorry, I haven't got the reference written there. But yeah, it's the most noble of the human beings are the most righteous. You know, this modern day and age is so much about the academics and about the grades and about the score and about the this and how fast you do things and how well you write and how this, and it's so much about that, but that's not how Allah measures us. It's not how we were created to be measured or to be judged. You know, it's really about the righteous ones of us and the development of that good, perfect character. And so the Prophet Muhammad SAW, he becomes our guideline. He becomes our model for how to be a perfect human being, but not just that, also our model for how to support the development of the human being. Because the Prophet Muhammad SAW was a teacher. So he is the best example of how to be a teacher and how to be an educator. Let me just check what the next slide is in case that stops there. How to be a teacher, how to be an educator. He's our perfect example. And so what we're going to do next in our next live is we're going to go into this a little bit more detail about, we're going to look at you have the videos that are online about the planes of development and so on, but we're going to go and look into actually what are the principles of Islamic education. What are the principles that we've seen our Prophet Muhammad SAW use when he's been either educating adults or educating children. We'll go into that and we'll have a look at that. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions on this before we look at the Moodle for this week?
So are we, since we have school holidays, are we doing class next week still, or?
I think it's best if next week we don't, because it is because our Eid is actually Thursday. I'm not sure what day you're doing Eid, but our Eid is actually Thursday in Malaysia. So they're going to be slaughtering and doing all sorts of things on the land here. So I don't think I'll be able to make a live, but we'll do the week after it. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Let me go on to the Moodle. Does anyone have any questions before I just bring up the Moodle? Okay, so week 2, you had. Did everyone manage to look at week 2? Did you manage to keep up? So you had the planes of development here, which, talks about this different stages of the development of the child. And we're going to go through this again, but we'll do it with more of an Islamic perspective, because those videos are not like that. But just make sure you've watched them, so it's really clear to you what we're talking about when we talk about planes of development. But for the week that's coming now, week 3, we're now going to go into talking about the absorbent mind. So we mentioned the absorbent mind today, right? We're going to talk about the absorbent mind. We're going to look into how the absorbent mind works. And then we're going to go into grace and courtesy, which is really important because it's one of the ways that we kind of role model grace and etiquettes in a classroom with children who are younger. And there's some videos here to show you very simple things like how to walk around a mat or how to push in a chair. But this also goes into social interactions as well. And then we have some more activities for the practical life area. Has anyone, did anyone implement any of those activities or try any of those activities out in any of the sessions? No?
Do you mean the assignments, like the 3-period lesson and that, or?
Yeah, but I mean, like, these videos that are here, like orange. So last week you had other ones, but this coming week it's like things that orange juicing and stuff. Does anyone have a look at them and try any of them out to see how they went? Is there any feedback from that?
I just tried with my son the 3-period lesson and it went really well.
Yeah, I mean, the 3-period lesson is really a magical tool.
Amazing.
And I think that for us as Muslims, we know the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ liked odd numbers, right? And we know that there's a lot of reference where the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ repeated things 3 times, right? So there is a connection there for us. It's not, yes, Montessori used that as a 3-period lesson, but actually there is this, if you look at how the Prophet was, there were many examples of the Prophet ﷺ, implementing things in that 3-period lesson kind of format. Okay? So yeah, make sure you try it out. And part of your assignments is to actually record yourself doing a 3-period lesson. So if you can do that, that would be great, because I'll give you feedback. Once you post it on the Google Classroom, I'll give you feedback and, give you any guidance that you need to improve anything on that. But anyway, for this week, you actually have an assignment to make a practical life lesson. So the absorbent mind, and then you have to create a practical life activity. So you've got some reading, and then you have to create a practical life activity. So observing a child to see kind of what interests they have or what needs they have, and then taking a practical, real life thing that they need to be doing, and they want to work towards independence in that, and then breaking that down into an activity. So for example, we had the children had a cake recently, and then using a knife to cut the cake. How could you break that down into either a lesson or several lessons to build the child's ability up to that? So really looking at a skill that's needed, that you've observed that's needed, and then creating your own activity for that. So you can have a look at the instructions. And then there's a lesson plan template for you to fill in. Yeah, so you're going to be looking at the absorbent mind. Absorbent mind is really, I think, really fascinating, because this is really where the child is absorbing everything, like you said, like a sponge, absorbing everything. And it becomes the basis of their personality. It becomes the basis of who they're going to be as an adult. So we know then, as Muslims, if the child has this absorbent mind, then that period from 0 to 6 is so crucial. No wonder why the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ tells us that even from when you're thinking about marriage, you have to think about the right partner for the children that you're going to bring into this world, right? And then the characteristics of a righteous woman and a righteous man to have these children, because the child is going to absorb those characteristics directly from, first of all, their parents, and then us as educators. After the family, we would come next, right? So you can take a look at that. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? It's a bit quiet. No? Okay. Everybody has been able to access the videos and they've been fine for you. Is that right? Okay. So just let me know if anything else comes up. And I will put this recording up there, and I'll also post our characteristics. You can add to that. So if anything else comes up, just add to that list, because I really, like with my team at school, I really believe that it's important that they have it clearly. What are we aiming to create within ourselves, and support the children in developing. Okay. Anyone want to ask any questions or share anything before we end? No? Okay, inshallah. Sorry for Thursday again. I'm very sorry for that. Please forgive me. And thank you for coming on today. And inshallah, we will meet. Have a lovely Eid and keep us in your prayers. Let me know if there's any questions that pop up along the way, but we will meet the week after Eid, inshallah.
Jazakallah khair.
Jazakumullah khair and Eid Mubarak to you.
Eid Mubarak.
Eid Mubarak.
Alaikum salam.
Take care.
Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum.